Last week, we shaped Arabella's first plank, the starboard garboard. This week, we'll use about every clamp and jack in the house to get this monster bent and screwed onto the boat. We had left the garboard plank on the boat overnight, and in the morning checked over a few spots where it wasn't quite hitting the back rabbit. After trying a few times to adjust the jacks to try to force it in, we decided that we would need to take care of it in some other way.
5/8.
Yeah, and it needs to finish 1.25 inches, so we could still
It's a half an inch.
safely back it out there and not be in danger of making the plank too
What
thin.
would you be backing out? Where would you be backing the top?
Yeah, Alex said that he believes that the
Right.
backing out along the frame, because I can almost get my pinky between the plank and the frame down here.
Right. Yeah.
So he's saying that he thinks that needs to be backed out significantly more, and that that's a big part of the issue.
Then you're talking about moving this in that amount
Yep.
where it isn't moving in there. So this whole thing is going to be between that 9 inches or something is going to be bending in at the top.
Yeah, but I'm saying to back it out enough that that touches all the way, we're gonna have to back out quite a bit.
Yeah, it's like 3/8 or something.
Yeah,
But you have it.
we do have it. It's the joys of putting on a thick garboard. Well, so if I understand this correctly, the next step is we gotta mark the bottom where we've got to carve it out. And we've got to mark this where we've got to back it out.
Right.
Try that,
Right.
and then it should be able to be hung.
Right.
Woo! Three-sixteenths. Quarter-inch. You have anywhere that's bigger than a 1/4 inch? I don't think so. Yeah, quarter.
And out there, this.
We removed the plank and drew out the lines from the marks we had made where we needed to back out some more. We also dubbed one of the frames where the plank was not sitting evenly like it should. Steve worked the adze along the forward edge of the frame to get that fixed. Then we scribed the lines for the adjustments needed on the bottom edge along the rabbet.
We are almost really close to having the garboard fit. We've put it on the boat and off the boat twice now. We've done a little more backing out. And the next thing we're going to do is run the rabbet plane with the fence on it down the edge here. And we made some marks where it was sitting a little tall. So we got to take off some of those high spots. And then after that, it'll be another test fit, hopefully the last test fit. And then we'll be able to bolt this puppy in place, which will be the first plank on Arabella. And that'll be really, really exciting. And it should also be one of the harder planks on the boat. After this, the planks get a lot smaller. They're not nearly as wide. So shaping them and fitting them should be a lot less of an endeavor, which will be fantastic. Nothing like getting the hard ones out of the way.
big pipe clamps turned out to be great at getting the planks to sit further into the rabbet.
Oh, it's going.
And we used these in other places where we needed to move the plank vertically.
It's only right here, and it's not that much. Yeah, right there.
Thad tried to close up the larger part of the gap up forward with a Japanese saw, but we were going to have to remove it again, and we would make some more adjustments once it was back on the sawhorses.
There's a little ridge in there that I'm not cutting. This is what I call pigs in space.
Yeah.
Yes. That's what we've been saying as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where you don't know where you are until you get there.
Until you bring them together.
Early on, when I
Screw you.
started posting about the build on the forum, James Madison on the
Yeah,
West Coast,
Yeah, I know who he is.
yeah, he said something along the lines of, take everyone's advice and then forget it and go do what you were originally going to go do.
Right.
Now that we were comfortable with the fit on the bottom edge of the plank, it was time to create the caulking bevel. This will make the edge that sits along the back rabbet a bit lower than the outside edge, creating a slight wedge-shaped opening. Later, this is where the cotton caulking will get packed in. So we have spent the majority of the day today kind of taking this plank and putting it on and taking it off and talking with Thad and trying to figure out exactly how it's going to fit. So we are pretty close. The caulking bevel is cut right down here as well. Everything seems pretty fair. And the last thing we got to do is we realize that maybe this frame needs to come out just a little bit. So I'm going to whip up a quick shim for that. We're going to glue that on tonight, and then we're going to paint the back rabbet where we're going to put in the dolphinite behind the garboard. And I guess we're going to call it a day. Let all that stuff dry, and maybe tomorrow we can hang this plank. The next morning, I blew dust out of the center line. Steve shaped the shim that we had glued up and left overnight.
It's been a busy couple days here putting this big beast of a plank on and off the boat and getting things scrubbed and figured out. But the starboard garboard is painted, and that only means one thing, and that is it's ready to go onto the boat. And the port side here is all scarfed up and just needs a couple measurements from the starboard transferred over to it. Since the boat should be very close to symmetrical, we can spile out and get one plank figured and then transfer that over to the other blank, move it onto the boat, do some test fitting, but it'll be close enough that we can just go from the pattern from the other one to the test fit and not have to do the whole spiling process again, which would be really nice. We just have to remember to do that because you get kind of eager to get the plank on the boat, and I've heard tales of people forgetting to make their copy of it. So we're going to transfer those measurements real quick. We got to adjust that shim that we put on one of the forward frames yesterday, and then give that a coat of paint, a few minutes for it to dry a little bit, smear on some dolphinite, and we should be able to clamp this plank into place. And clamping it in takes like an hour or two to go through and adjust all the clamps and get it all wrestled in there. So it's a little bit of a process. But hopefully, if all goes well, by the end of the today, we'll have this puppy bolted into place, which will be Arabella's first plank. No! I didn't quite set it deep enough. Try that again.
We knew we had the room, but now we needed to figure out how to maneuver the 25-foot plank over to the port side.
Yeah, let's just pick the boat up. We'll just slide the plank right under. Well, it's time to officially hang the garboard and screw it onto the boat. And to be honest, this feels a little anticlimactic since we've put it on and taken it off and put it on and taken it off like 3 times already. But this is should be final fit, and we've got all the hardware and all the fasteners out. So we're gonna spread a little dolphinite on the back rabbit and pop this puppy in place, clamp it down, and hopefully everything will fit really nicely again like it did last time we put it on. And then we can put in a whole bunch of fasteners and put it on the boat for hopefully a very, very long time before this garboard has to come off again.
This is an epic amount of dolphinite going in. We have a long ways to go.
Yeah, I know.
Hold on a second.
Well, folks, the starboard garboard kicked our asses today. We felt like we had it fit pretty well yesterday, and we did a couple last little tweaks, gave it a paint, and put it on. And I don't know if it was just the way things twisted in or what happened, but we ended up with a little bigger gap on the rabbet up here at the forefoot than we would have liked.
but we had put the dolphinite on and everything else, so we were pretty loath to take the plank off and do a whole lot of, not a whole lot, I mean it was a very little tweaking. So the gap that we had was somewhere between like 1/8 and 3/16, and we wanted to close that up just a little bit more and get it down to a little over 1/16. So we ended up putting a bunch of clamps on it and these car jacks and these big blocks, and we managed to get it to close up quite a bit. So now we're down to maybe just a smidge over 1/8. So we're going to leave the clamps and everything overnight and just kind of let the wood settle a little bit, let the plank kind of relax into that position, and hopefully we can come out in the morning and crank them up and pull out another 32nd or so, and then we'll screw everything down and call it a day. But wrestling in this 1 3/4 inch thick by 12 inch wide oak garboard has been a fight, and I've got the war wounds to prove it. But I think we pretty much got it, and hopefully tomorrow we'll crank it down that last little bit and then get everything screwed together. We left the garboard clamped overnight, and what started out as a little bit over an 1/8 inch gap became an 1/8 inch gap, became a 3/16 gap, and that is well within the realm of cockable, and it's just in one tiny little area. So we could pull the plank off and shave everything down and try to close up that tiny little gap, but honestly I think we're going to do more harm than good if we do that, and we're probably just going to trade that gap for somewhere else. And it's totally cockable. It's well within tolerances of what it needs to be. So today we are going to screw this puppy down and get all these clamps off and move on to the other side. So down low where it goes into the back rabbet, we're going to put in these bronze screws. And then higher up where we can get to the frames, we're going to put in these bronze carriage bolts that are going to go through the plank, through the frame, and through the bronze floor, and start to tie all of that together. And then once we get past the bronze floors, we'll switch over from the carriage bolts to the copper rivets for the rest of the hull. We've got 2 different dividers set up here that we're going to use to help space the fasteners down the backbone. So we have one set to 1 1/4 inch, which is about as far or as close we want to get to the edge of the planks. We want to make sure that there's enough meat on the edge that plank edge isn't going to split out. We have another divider set to 3 inches, and that's what we want our screw spacing to be here on the stem. And the reason for that is that we're going to have the mast here, which is going to put a lot of pressure on the forefoot and the beginning of the stem. And then we also have a lot of twist and shape here. So you can see we have the car jacks in play. We have a lot of clamps holding it down. So we're going to put a tight screw fastening here where we have a lot of twist and a lot of pressure going on. As we move towards the stern and those pressure and those twists relax a little bit, we'll spread the screw spacing out a little bit, probably to like 4 or 5 inches. And then in the stern where there's a lot less pressure and we have an entire plank against the back rabbet, we'll probably spread them out to even maybe 6 inches back there, just because there's a lot more territory to put screws in and there's a lot less forces and twist going on. So we'll use the dividers, go through, countersink the holes, and then start putting in some screws. We're going to take the forced air here that we ran a while back from the shop out to the boathouse when we put in the rivet press, and we're going to blow out the holes, make sure they're cleaned up as we go down and put in the fasteners. And this is the kind of thing that makes us laugh now, because thinking back to YouTube comments back when we were digging a trench and putting in the line to the boathouse for the compressor, and so many people were commenting about why we were doing that and wasting our time and how we should just get to work on the boat. And now, instead of running lines every time we want to use it, we just go over and turn on the air compressor, and the hose is all hooked up in the boathouse, and the lines are underground and out of way and out of harm's way. And so we're saving a lot of time now, and we paid for it early on, and it's been kind of the name of the game with us, and it gets paid dividends, so glad we did it. 1 or 2 more planks, and then the frames become a lot more pliable, and they'll move in and out a little bit with the
Right.
with the planking.
Right.
Right now, there's not much give to them down low,
No.
especially not after we put the bronze floors in them.
Good.
You don't
So
think
we
we're gonna make
want-
the boat too stiff?
I don't think so.
Some people have that concern.
Right. If it doesn't bend, it'll break.
Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah.